Myself Sonika Anand Sore, working as assistant professor in PR MITR Badnera. Today I am going to introduce xhtml and CSS concept. Now, what is xhtml? xhtml stands for Extensible Hypertext Markup Language. xhtml is aimed to replace HTML. xhtml is almost identical to the HTML 4.01. xhtml is stricter and cleaner version of HTML. XML Extensible Markup Language is a markup language designed to further describing data. XHTML is HTML redefined as XML application. XHTML is a bridge between HTML and XML. Now the problem with HTML. HTML started out as a way of describing the structure of document with tags to indicate header, paragraph and the like. Because people wanted to control appearance of the document, HTML required tags to control fonts, alignment and etc. The result is markup language that does both but isn't very good either. HTML versus XML. XML looks a lot like a HTML, but HTML uses a fixed set of tags, whereas with XML you make your own tag. HTML is designed to display the data to human, whereas XML is designed to describe data to computer. Browsers are very tolerant of error in HTML, whereas in XML, document must be well formed, syntactically correct. All browsers can display in HTML, whereas all modern browsers display XML but in various ways. From HTML to XML. XHTML element must be properly nested. XHTML document must be well formed. Here there is one example. You can see that there is opening of HTML, then head, then closing of head, then body, then closing of body and closing of HTML. Tag name must be in lowercase. All HTML elements must be closed. Here there is one example of given that. Now from HTML to XHTML. Attribute name must be also in lowercase. Example, there is one example in curly bracket table width equals to in double quote 100% and angle bracket close. Attribute value must be quoted. Example, there is one example given. Then attribute minimize in forbidden. There is also one example given. You can see that the ID attribute replaces the name attribute. Here there is again one example of that. Now SGML and DTS. SGML stands for Standard Generalized Markup Language, that is the full form of SGML. HTML, XHTML, XML and many other markup languages are defined in SGML. A DTD or document type definition describes the syntax used for the current document. There are 3 different DTDs for XHTML. You can pick the one of you want. These DTDs are public on the web. You must start your XHTML document with reference to the one of these DTDs. Doc type declaration 1. Every XHTML document must begin with the one of the document declaration, that are the DTDs. You can see the example for that. Now doc type declaration 2. Here you can see that the main DTDs are follow. First one is the strict DTD. Used for really clean markup with no display information. Use with CSS if want to define how the document should look. Then next DTD is at 1.0 transitional. With the standard HTML and or with CSS allows depressed HTML element. Third one is the 1.0 frame set. Use if document uses HTML frames. Then the last doc type is 1.1. Like 1.0 strict but with added support for Chinese. An XHTML example. Here there is one example of XHTML. Here there is a first doc type mentioned, then head, title. Here the simplest document is the title. Here there is a closing of title, then closing of head. Here there is a body part, then here closing of HTML. Here there are extensions. A file containing a HTML page should have the extension .html. Then according to the W3 school, an XHTML page should have extension .xhtml. However, I had trouble getting JavaScript to work on the pages this extension. I recommend strict with the .html at least for now. Now there is a vocabulary. SGML stands for Standard Generalized Markup Language. HTML Hypertext Markup Language. XHTML extensible hypertext markup language, XML extensible markup language, TTD document type definition. Now, what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, allows us to apply formatting and styling to the HTML that builds our web pages. CSS can control many elements of our web pages: colors, fonts, alignment, border, background, spacing, margin, and much more. CSS defines how HTML elements are to be displayed. There is a syntax for CSS. CSS rules set of consists of selector and declaration block. Syntax. There is a syntax. First one is element, then property, then value, again property, and again value. Example, here h1 is the selector and color is the property, blue is the value. Again, font size is the property and 12px is the value. h1 is the selector point to the HTML that you want to style. Here you can see that one is the selector. Declaration block contain one or more declarations separated by semicolon. Here you can see that declaration separated by semicolon. Each declaration includes a property, range, and value separated by colon. Then types of CSS. Inline styling is useful for the applying a unique style single HTML elements. Inline styling uses the style attribute. These inline styling changes the text color of the single heading. Now the second is the internal styling. That one is the internal CSS. In internal styling, style sheet can be used to define common style for all HTML elements on the page. External style sheet. External CSS are ideal when the style is applied to many pages. Now, how does the CSS work? CSS works in conjunction with the HTML. A HTML file or multiple file links to CSS file, and when web browser display to the page, it refers to the CSS file to determine how to display the content. HTML elements are marked with the IDs, classes, which are defined in the CSS file. This is how the browser which styles belong to where. Each element's type, heading, image, p, li, etc. can be also styled with CSS. What is the difference between ID and classes? ID and classes function in the same way. They can both provide the same styling function to the HTML elements. However, ID are unique. Each element can only have one ID, and that ID can only on the one page once. Classes are not unique. An element can have multiple classes, and multiple elements can have the same classes. What does that mean? IDs can be used to style elements that are different from anything else on the page. Classes can be used to style multiple elements on single page that have things in common like font size, color, or style. What does the CSS file look like? The style for each element IDs classes used to an HTML element page are defined as a CSS document. Elements are declared with the element HTML tag styles for h1 elements wrapped in the curly braces bracket h1. Here you can see that. Then classes are declared with the period and class name. Styles for the classes are wrapped into the curly brackets body text. Here you can see that the body text also in a curly bracket. Then what does the CSS look like that? Within each CSS element styles are added that applies that to the particular element ID and classes. Here there is one example h1 and here color and green. Here the property, and for property that there is one value, that one is the green.